Hello and good morning. My presentation will compare and contrast the works of Bartolo de las Casas' brief account of the destruction of the Indies to Raul Diaz's true history of the conquest of New Spain, in an attempt to partially answer the following questions. First, I will seek to understand why these men wrote their accounts in the first place. Following that, I will also seek to understand what were some of the motivations that motivated Spanish colonists to come settle the New World that are exemplified through these accounts. Both men wrote their accounts to further personal agendas, while at the same time hoping to promote their cause in what ought to be recorded in the history with regards to the conquest. While Las Casas focused on God with regards to the salvation of the natives and justice with regards to native rights, Diaz decided to focus on gold with regards to personal wealth, and glory with regards to himself and his fellow foot soldiers, as he wanted to step away from the focus on the conquistadors like Cortez and other well-known figures. Despite these differing retellings of the extent of the brutalities during the conquest, through their accounts, both men stand as an example of what motivated the Spanish to pursue lives within the New World. Diaz, through this book, wrote to the Holy Roman Emperor and King of Spain at the time, Charles V, describing his services and seeking benefits nearly 50 years after the events he describes in the book actually happened. This seeking of benefits, however, was a standard action of the conquistadors during the time, as they would document their services to the crown and request for rewards. Thus, Diaz, in his writing, describes the actions he took part in, and the campaigns against the Mexica. During this campaign, Diaz speaks frequently about his fellow foot soldiers and about their experiences, from which he would form the focus of his later historical retellings. What is interesting about Diaz's text is that he writes the natives as being both courageous in combat and describes the city of Tectichlan as being very spacious and well built, of magnificent stone, cedar wood, and the woods of other sweet-smelling trees, with great rooms and courts, which were all a wonderful sight. Interpretations of native society were historically accurate on Diaz's part, yet Diaz incorporates this image of a sophisticated native society to further his own claims to fame and gold within the eyes of the crown. As while many Spaniards saw the natives as a simple people, Diaz seeks to reverse this view, for the sake of creating a formidable enemy within the eyes of the reader. This, of course, gives an extra level of grandeur towards Diaz's accomplishments in his conquest, along with his fellow men, which he cherishes so dearly. Diaz's work, Gold and Glory, form the backbone of why he writes in the first place. While he correctly and purposefully portrays the natives as a formidable enemy, he does so not entirely for the sake of historical accuracy, but has a deeper reasoning of personal wealth and lasting legacy that guides him to establish an image of the natives in the way that he does. Further, it should be noted that the type of retellings of events of the conquest, like the one Diaz puts forth, was commonplace among his conquistador peers, as they sought their own compensation and glory for their actions in the New World from the Spanish crown. While other conquistadors' accounts, like Gormara's, were not always as historically accurate as Diaz's, it leaves the general impression that wealth and glory were some of the defining motivations of the Spanish who sought to conquer this new world. Now moving away from Diaz and onto the works of Las Casas, his work, from the perspective of a priest, provides an interesting contrast to Diaz's work and provides further motivations for the Spanish settlements of the New World. Like Diaz, Las Casas served time as a conquistador and owned land for a time after the conquest. However, the brutality of the fighting, along with the influence from the Dominican friar Antonio Montesos, led to his conversion to the Catholic faith in 1523. This turn of heart motivated Las Casas to stand up for native rights and explain the many injustices he witnessed while he campaigned within the New World. Las Casas thus writes, not seeking glory or fame from his work, but rather furthers his agenda of justice and rights for the native peoples as a stepping stone to their conversion to the Catholic faith through his writing, which at the time motivated many other missionaries. See the 1585 Dictario para Confesores of the Third Mexican Provincial Councils as an example. Within the mind of Las Casas, then, along with many other Catholic missionaries, it was seen as the right of a creation of God to be offered salvation through conversion to the Catholic faith. Natives, then, being of such a creation, in their eyes, were justly entitled to the same salvation that had been afforded to the priests during their own conversion during their own childhood. Standing in the way of this justice, then, are the conquistadors, like Diaz, who, in the eyes of Las Casas, were motivated primarily by greed and ambition, who desired to take the golden natives for personal gain. Las Casas certainly believed that a true conversion was done through the natives freely choosing to convert. However, it was the inhumane actions and brutal massacres that his work describes that stood in the way of more natives from fully converting. In an effort to restore this trust in the goodness of the Catholic God within the eyes of the natives, then, Las Casas, along with many other missionaries, saw it as the duties of the Catholic Church to uphold justice for the natives if they were to fulfill their mission of securing salvation to as many natives as possible through conversion. In beginning to compare and contrast these two books, Diaz's motivations stem from a quest for fame and glory, and the accompanying riches based on the conquest contrast with the religious motivations of the writings of Las Casas' book. And yet both are united in their desire to provide justification for the Spanish invasion of the New World. While religious conversion and justice in the eyes of God are certainly played a role, glory and gold, as promoted by Diaz, further added to the Spanish rationale. This point is made evident by Diaz himself, as he writes, "I am now an old man, over 84 years old, and I have lost both sight and hearing, and unfortunately I have gained no wealth to leave my children and descendants, except this true story, which is a most remarkable one, as my readers will presently see." Diaz wrote this account years after the actual events recounted in the book transpired, and while he personally gained no wealth immediately following the campaigns in which he participated. It was the hope that by presenting his version of the facts, the Spanish people would finally provide the men with whom he fought the due respect and riches that he believed were justly owed to them. For Diaz wrote with the self-serving end of gaining additional rewards for his great and noble services to the king, and his book was meant for the eyes of their grave worships. Glory and gold defined why Diaz. Las Casas, on the other hand, decided to write with different intentions. While focusing on his major themes of justice and God, which he hoped to further integrate into the New World society, he was far less focused on the gold and personal wealth that drove many conquistadors like Diaz to fight and ultimately settle in the New World. While both men, then, had their own reasons as to why they participated in the settlement of this New World, a deeper synthesizing of these two texts is still needed to fully understand the picture of the argument I am still presenting. In conclusion, and synthesizing these two texts side by side then, each provides various reasons as to why the Spanish felt obligated to invade and ultimately colonize the New World. Yet they differ to a great extent with regards to the exactness as to what motivated them to act, which is reflected in their writing. While Las Casas sees justice as the product of extending the offer of eternal salvation within the Catholic Church to the natives whose rights must be protected in order for the latter to be possible, Diaz, on the other hand, sees the natives as a formidable adversary whose conquest was the product of a desperate fight between two forces determined on their own personal survivals, which is further done for the purpose of making the deeds of Diaz and his comrades seem more brave and daring, which should be further rewarded by the crown, as it was through their hard work that the wealth of the New World was being brought to Spain. Both men see the settling of the Americas as necessary, and use the natives to leverage their rationales. Taken together, both men provide four essential reasons for why the Spanish decided to conquer the New World, namely God, gold, glory, and justice. Understanding these points is essential for any historian looking to study this period, as in examining the influences and effects of the diverse motivations driving the Spanish aggression and colonization is a critical first step in understanding the history of this period.